Beneath the most studied painting in human history, a painting that has been X-rayed, infrared scanned, and analyzed by generations of the world's best scientists, something was found that the official record had no answer for. Not a hidden brushstroke, not an underpainting. Something that, by every measure of what we know about Leonardo da Vinci, the 15th century, and the physical laws of how paint ages, shouldn't be there. Here's what we know. The Mona Lisa has been scanned more times than almost any object on Earth. In 2004, in 2010, in 2015, every scan was supposed to confirm what we already believed. Instead, each one quietly complicated it. And the findings from the most recent deep spectral analysis, the one that was supposed to settle the question once and for all, revealed a structural anomaly in the lower layers of the painting that no one has been able to explain on the record. There is also the question of the woman, not who she was. That debate is centuries old, but what she was positioned over. Because underneath the face the entire world recognizes, the scans found evidence of a completely different figure, different posture, different gaze direction, different bone structure in the hands. And then there is the bridge. We'll come back to that. For 500 years, the accepted story has been clean. Leonardo da Vinci began the Mona Lisa around 1503. He painted it in layers, a technique he invented called sfumato, thin glazes of translucent pigment built one over another to create the illusion of skin, depth, atmosphere. He likely never finished it. He carried it with him until he died in France in 1519, and it never left his hands. The painting is a singular, continuous object, one vision, one artist, one evolution. That is the story every museum guide delivers. That is the story taught in every art history course. That is the story the Louvre's official literature has defended for over a century. But that story has a fracture in it. And the fracture isn't new. It's just been very carefully managed. It begins with a detail that sounds almost too simple to matter. The Mona Lisa has a bridge in the background. To the left, behind her shoulder, there is a small stone arch crossing a body of water. For centuries, art historians argued over which bridge it was, where in Italy it might be located, what it meant symbolically. Largely, the debate was treated as an academic footnote, the kind of thing only specialists cared about. Then, in 2023, historian Silvano Vincetti announced something that cut through all of it. Using deep archival research cross-referenced with drone aerial photography of the Arno Valley in Tuscany, Vincetti's team identified the bridge in the painting as the Romito di Laterina Bridge, a 36-arch Roman structure that was partially destroyed in World War II and is now mostly submerged. The identification was considered credible enough to make international headlines. But here is what didn't make the headlines. If the bridge is the Romito di Laterina, and if the geographic positioning of the surrounding landscape matches, which Vincetti's team claims it does with a precision that rules out coincidence, then the painting's background was constructed from a specific vantage point at a specific time. That doesn't align with where Leonardo is known to have been when the painting was supposedly being made. He would have needed to be somewhere he has no confirmed record of visiting, during a period he has no confirmed record of traveling. That alone could be explained. Artists worked from sketches. Leonardo traveled. Records from the early 1500s are incomplete. Fine, except that wasn't the disturbing part. The deeper scans of the Mona Lisa, specifically the 2015 analysis conducted by French scientist Pascal Cotte using layer amplification method technology, revealed something inside the paint that changed the geometry of the entire conversation. Cotte's process doesn't X-ray the surface. It fires intense light at the painting and measures how much is reflected back at different wavelengths. Each layer of paint, each era of application, each chemical composition reflects differently. What you get is essentially a timeline of the painting's creation, a stratigraphic map of every decision the artist made, in sequence. And what Cote found, buried beneath the final image we know, was a portrait of a completely different woman. Not a rough sketch, not an abandoned outline, a nearly finished portrait, fully rendered facial features, a different seated posture, hands in a different position, and critically, no smile. The figure underneath isn't smiling. She's looking slightly to the right. Her hands are folded differently. Her proportions are subtly but measurably distinct from the Mona Lisa we see today. Cote's conclusion, and he was careful with his language, was that Leonardo hadn't simply revised the painting. He had made what appeared to be a deliberate, considered decision to paint an entirely new figure over a completed one, not over a study, over a portrait that, by the evidence of its rendering, was meant to be the final work. Why would you finish a painting and then paint a different person over it? The Louvre disputed Cote's interpretation. Not his data, his interpretation. The institution's position was that what Cote identified as a different figure could be explained by Leonardo's iterative process, that the other woman was simply an early stage of the same portrait, a version, a draft. It's a reasonable counter-argument. It's also, when you look at Cote's actual imaging data, a difficult one to hold. Because the second figure, the one underneath, doesn't look like an early draft of Lisa Gherardini, who is the historically accepted subject of the painting. The bone structure of the face is measurably different. The nose bridge sits at a different angle. The chin is more pronounced. If this is the same woman at an earlier stage, Leonardo somehow reconstructed her face from the ground up between layers. And this is where the official version starts falling apart. There is a theory, not fringe, not conspiracy, but academically published and debated, that the Mona Lisa we have in the Louvre is not the only Mona Lisa Leonardo painted, the Isleworth Mona Lisa, a painting held by a Swiss foundation since the 1970s, originally acquired by British art collector Hugh Blaker in 1914 from an English aristocratic family who claimed it had been in their possession for centuries. Blaker believed it was an earlier version, a younger Lisa, painted before the Louvre version, then set aside when Leonardo returned to the subject with a more mature and ambitious vision. In 2012, the Mona Lisa Foundation released a technical report asserting the Isleworth version was authentic, painted on 16th century canvas using 16th century pigments, with compositional elements that couldn't have been produced by a later copyist because they contain perspective geometry that only matches the Louvre version when both paintings are treated as studies from the same physical space. In other words, whoever painted the Isleworth Mona Lisa was standing in the same room as whoever painted the Louvre Mona Lisa. The mainstream art history community has been resistant. Some scholars have dismissed the Isleworth as a high-quality period copy. Others have engaged with the data more seriously. The debate is not closed. It is, in fact, ongoing, and the institutions with the most to lose from the answer have been the least willing to submit their holdings to independent comparative analysis. The Louvre has never agreed to a direct side-by-side technical comparison. Now hold that. Because the anomaly in the lower layers, the one I mentioned at the beginning, becomes something different when you place it next to the Isleworth question. If there are two Mona Lisas, and if the painting beneath the Louvre Mona Lisa depicts a different woman, you now have three possible figures in this story instead of one: the woman underneath, the woman on top, and the younger woman in Switzerland. And the question that nobody in the institutional record will answer directly is this: which one did Leonardo actually intend as his final statement? Because here is what we know about how Leonardo worked. He was obsessive. He carried the Mona Lisa for 16 years. He never delivered it to the patron who commissioned it. He kept it, studied it, refined it, lived with it. When he died, it was in his studio. Artists don't do that with finished work. They do it with work that hasn't yet said what they needed it to say. So what was he still trying to say? And then there's the most recent development, the one that arrived quietly without the press coverage it deserved. In 2020 and again in 2022, researchers using macro X-ray fluorescence scanning, a technology only available at major particle accelerators, conducted new deep analysis of several Leonardo works, including preparatory material connected to the Mona Lisa. The findings, published in academic journals and largely ignored by popular media, revealed something in the pigment layering of the face that defied expected aging chemistry. The uppermost glaze layers of the Mona Lisa, the ones responsible for the famous soft focus quality of her skin, show a chemical degradation pattern inconsistent with uniform aging from a single 16th century application. Some microregions of the surface show aging signatures closer to 17th century material, not the whole painting, isolated regions. The kind of distribution that doesn't come from environmental exposure, it comes from localized, later application of paint. Someone touched this painting after Leonardo died. When? Who? Why? Those questions have no confirmed answers. What is confirmed is that the painting has layers applied at different times. What is confirmed is that there is a different figure underneath. What is confirmed is that the background contains geographic information suggesting a specific location and vantage point that strains the known biography of its creator. What this means, assembled together, is not that the Mona Lisa is a forgery. It is not a hoax. It is not a copy. It is, in all probability, a genuine Leonardo painting. But it may not be the painting Leonardo finished. It may be the painting someone else finished, after Leonardo, working from Leonardo's foundation, using Leonardo's materials or materials designed to match them, completing, altering, or overwriting something that was never meant to be seen in the state it was left. And if that is true, then the face the entire world knows, the face that is the most recognized image in human history, may not be the face Leonardo intended us to see. The actual final portrait may be underneath, unfinished, unsmiling, looking slightly to the right, waiting in the dark beneath 5 centuries of paint and varnish and institutional certainty for a technology precise enough to finally read it. We have that technology now. We are not using it. The Louvre has declined every request for a full stratigraphic deep scan using current particle accelerator imaging, the only method capable of resolving the chemical dating question with the precision required to tell us, definitively, which layers were applied when and by whose hand. The official reason given is preservation concerns. The unofficial reason, suggested by multiple researchers who have worked in proximity to the painting, is simpler and older than science. Some questions, once answered, cannot be managed. And the Mona Lisa, as a cultural object, as a symbol, as the gravitational center of an entire industry of tourism, scholarship, and national identity, is worth more as a mystery than it would ever be as a solved problem, which means the most studied painting on Earth may be protected not from damage, but from the answer.